3 o'clock here in Boston, in Wakefield, Massachusetts, just up the road from Boston. And we are delighted to have Elizabeth Stein with us today from the great Empire State of New York. And Elizabeth's going to talk to us today about her book, Elevating Co-Teaching Through UDL. Elizabeth teaches special ed in an inclusion setting, middle school setting in Long Island, and has a lot of experience at the elementary, middle, and college levels. She has developed deep expertise in co-teaching over the years and also in mentoring both general and special education teachers. And she has a terrific monthly blog, Two Teachers in the Room. You may have also seen Elizabeth recently on Education Week's blog. She's a regular there and speaks across the United States about UDL and implementation and coaches. So we're thrilled to have Elizabeth here, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Stein, and then we'll come back after a short presentation from Elizabeth and have a sort of interview and question and answer period. So be sure to let us know any questions you have, and we'll give you a chance to pose those to Elizabeth in the second half of the program. So Elizabeth Stein, over to you.
Thank you, David. First, a very warm, heartfelt hello and welcome to everyone who is joining us today. It's inspiring to be with such a global crowd. It just speaks to the natural connection that UDL has, right? We speak the same language, and regardless of where we live, we have the same experiences that UDL really connects with. So thank you, David. Also behind the scenes, thanks to Mindy and Nathan and everyone at CAST for making this webinar happen, and also for making the book come out, and my ability to share my voice and experiences. I'm finding that people from all over the states and further are really connecting with, again, the language of UDL and how it really connects to getting teachers to work collaboratively and really connecting with one another. So I'm going to share my screen, and bear with me for a minute. And here we go. One more time. So let's do it this way. Yes, that's exactly the way I wanted to do it. So as far as, again, a warm welcome to everyone. And I'm so honored and thrilled to be here today. So today, what we're going to do is just go over a few of the underlying conceptual orientations that I hoped that the book would express. And the interesting part is, this book came about as I transferred from elementary teaching, where I taught for 8 years and experienced a variety of co-teaching experiences there. Some great, some not so great, but all extremely valuable and successful. And then I decided to take the leap. I really wanted to work with more content area academics and work with students at the middle school level. So I had this real passion for helping students be self-advocates. And at the elementary level, you're able to do that with parents, with students. And then at the middle school level, I really wanted to take on the challenge of that. I'm sorry, I'm getting blinked here. I wanted to get on the challenge of helping students become self-advocates. And so when I was at the elementary level, UDL really was such a source of resilience for me. I worked with some co-teachers who, thought special ed teachers were the quiet teachers who walked around the room, and did their job, worked with students, and that was that. And I knew there was more to that. I knew that there was expertise that I had in terms of the process of learning and strategies and the content that I could express to students. And it was this nice process where UDL really served to help me work with my co-teachers at that level. And when I moved to the middle school level, I had to start from square one. And those teachers were not on board as openly with the UDL framework. It seemed like something brand new and something that we didn't seem to have time for, which would always make me cringe, because UDL really is a natural connection. Yes, it takes more time to invest in the mind shift and the proactive planning involved, but once you get into that process, it really makes life easier for everyone, and it empowers students to really be self-regulated learners. So this book came about when I made that transition from elementary to middle, and I'm a writer. I just journal. I've been writing since before I could write, I would draw, and I would always just keep little journals and writing notebooks as long as I can remember. So this book came about by looking back at one of my journals and saying, this hopefully will help other teachers as well in terms of using UDL to strengthen co-teaching relationships. So 3 underlining conceptual orientations, and I like to call them mantras, because these are the 3 pieces that I continuously connect with as I meet with resistance or meet with teachers who might not be as willing to share that UDL mindset. So the first one is it's all about variability. We know that UDL speaks to the natural variability that exists in every population, wherever human beings are, wherever learners are gathered. It is about learner variability. It is not about disability and categorizing human beings into groups of strong, weak, all those disability categories, or English language learners. It's about saying, here we are as a population, as this wonderful group of learners who are part of this natural variability. So that connects with co-teachers as well. We have 2 co-teachers in the room who are also a part of this natural variability, who really should be embraced. The next mantra is context is really where it's at. So it's not about learning styles. Learning preferences, yes, not learning styles. I know that ruffles a lot of feathers, and personally I'm starting to enjoy ruffling those feathers, because it's really raising conversations that really need to happen. So an example is a student who has a visual learning style written on his or her IEP. So there's teachers who say, okay, so I'm going to provide that smartboard or that PowerPoint or that graphic so that student who is a visual learner will get this lesson. But the truth is, it's about the context of the lesson. There are times where visual is not enough. We need to make sure that there's additional auditory or kinesthetic, or get the students up and moving, and really looking at the lesson involved and then planning accordingly. So it's focusing on the strengths of the students and the context of the lesson. Another mantra that will be that common thread that all co-teachers can connect UDL with is it's about co-creating a community of learners. So co-teachers need to be flexible, right? That's what UDL is all about, flexibility. We want to create expert learners who we embrace the variability, we have the context, and we are flexible to be in the moments, allowing students to raise their voices, allowing students to say, what do I think about what the teacher is saying right now? How do I connect with the what of learning? How do I connect with this content? And teachers really need to create that community to create the space so that students can raise their voice and really start to process. So it's learner-centered, it's being mindfully resilient, and persevering through any challenges. So as far as today, the goals, simple: relax, enjoy, really just connect. What is it that you are already doing, or what is it that you already know that connects with what we're going to be talking about today? And ask yourself at the end of our time today, so at 4 o'clock Eastern time, or whatever time it is by you after we're done, ask yourself, what is one way that you can go one step beyond the point you're at now? One step beyond. That's all you have to do today. And really, it's about ramping up the advocacy. We as educators need to advocate for our roles. Special ed teachers need to advocate for his or her role as a special education teacher. And general ed teachers need to advocate for their roles. Students need to advocate for their role as a learner. And the truth is we are all learners. So advocating for ourselves and for one another really is my hope for our time today and onward and never ending. So ways that you can ramp up the advocacy. You can leave comments at my blog at Two Teachers in the Room. You can join UDL Chat. Yay, UDL Chat the first and third Wednesday every month. You can join Co-Teaching Chat, which is Co-Teach Chat, second and fourth Tuesday. You can tweet, email, network yourself. Make sure you're connecting with people face-to-face in your communities, in your schools, in your towns, wherever you live, and also growing your learning, your own professional network, your community of learners. So one of the underlying goals that I've learned to really put into everything I do, if those in the crowd are currently co-teaching, you know what it's like to face someone who says, after you give an idea, somebody says, yeah, but we don't know if that'll work, or no, we don't have time for that, or any excuse, right, just to stay on that path that they're used to doing. So if we can choose to be a yes and person instead of a yes but person, that would be an amazing shift towards aligning UDL and just towards elevating co-teaching in general, because it values our listening of what others are saying. It values that others, the perspective of others is important, and we can add our voice and our ideas to one another to create that learning community. And it's a great improv strategy that is really a great mindset shift to help you along the way. So be a yes and person. So my intention for today is, again, relax, enjoy. We're going to have more of a conversation than presentation. So I'm looking forward to that. And thinking about what your experiences are and what your actionable steps could be following our time together today. So also I want to give an additional shout out to all those who will be watching this in the archives once it's recorded. I know there are a lot of you out there. I've received a lot of emails and tweets and so on. So an additional warm hello to you. So for everyone here with us today and watching during the recording, what is it that you hope to accomplish? So what is your intention? Staying focused on that intention during our time today, but allowing it to be flexible and evolve as we go along together today. So you're a piece of the puzzle, right? We create this global world of awareness and real wonderful action steps. For today, please use the chat box. Also Twitter, you could tag me at that handle right there, Elizabeth L. Stein. Don't forget to tag also CAST. And also there's many hashtags you can use. Please make sure you use them along the way, not just today, but in general. And email me as you feel, whether it's today, tomorrow, a week from now. And really just make sure you're going to be connecting, even if it's that you feel like sitting quietly today and just jotting down on a Post-it or on anything you can write down, or if somebody's in the room with you, just share it out loud. Just make sure you're connecting. So thank you for that. So we're going to jump in right now. Basically, the book goes into the co-teaching models in a bit more detail, but the book is really about what's beyond the co-teaching models. The models are a start. I go into so many classrooms. This is a great place to insert that, yes, David's right. I teach at the middle school level. However, my role has shifted. This is my third year as an instructional coach. Special education / UDL instructional coach in my district. So I get to work with teachers K through 12 in my district this year with a primary focus on the elementary grades, where we're embedding UDL within co-teaching models and just within classrooms in general. So, and I also connect with districts around the states, and I find so many teachers get so excited, as they should, that they're applying the co-teaching models, and they say, great, I'm really excited to share this story with you. Look what we did today. And they're highlighting one of the models, one of the structures that we can give great thanks to Marilyn Friend and all of the researchers who created those models for us. Those are the structures. And now it becomes, well, what are we doing within those structures? That's where we need to start differentiating and really embedding those strategies that really meet the needs of our variable learners. So co-teaching models is a start, but we are ready to go beyond. So the elements of co-teaching, you can read my book, you can read any book on co-teaching, any book on UDL, and I have put it into 3 elements. You might disagree. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Any idea that has ever come my way, to me, falls within these 3 easy to remember elements. So a shared vision must happen. So how many times we have co-teachers who say, oh, if I can only just stay together with my co-teacher, if we only had more than 1 or 2 or 3 years together, we'd be fine. I'm tired of working with new partners every year. But if we hold true to these 3 elements, I think we would be on a much stronger universal path for success in co-teaching. Creating a shared vision, regardless of the 2 teachers who are together, each has a vision, each has a mission, each has a passion for teaching, each has an area of expertise. So to share that with one another is really key. Being flexible, that piece is a little bit floating because I wanted to make it a little bit, processy, because flexibility has to weave throughout. Getting back to our yes and language, when someone shares his or her vision with you, remember that yes and, even if you disagree with that person, your co-teacher, it's okay. We value that vision, and then we add ours to it, and we're flexible along the way. Active expertise is evident throughout the learning process for students and for both teachers. It is just such a shame to me, and I think back to my own co-teaching experiences, how many times I was forced into this mode of being that quiet special ed teacher for whatever the reasons were. They weren't ready to really move beyond yet as a district, as a co-teaching pair. So we needed to balance ourselves out. So I definitely have some memories of myself as that quiet teacher who found another way to reach the students. If I couldn't reach them in the moments every day, I found another time during that day, or I always worked through the students if I couldn't work through the co-teaching partnership. But truth is, when you're persistent and resilient enough, there's always a way to connect with the co-teachers so that the active expertise is evident throughout. Learning is a process, and every learner in the room should be showing some form of action, whether it's sitting quietly at desks reading and note-taking and annotating, whether it's physically moving around. There's many options to show that active expertise. So those 3 elements of co-teaching, to me, really run through everything that we do. Going back to our learner variability, we're talking about all learners. So, right, doesn't that mean the teachers too? Yes, it does. We forget that sometimes. Sometimes teachers are so teacher-centered and focused on what he or she needs to do. And then other teachers are so student-centered where there's this balance of, maybe we have to go back to the goal and remember why we created these activities. But when we embrace learner variability along the UDL process, we know that we're going to be planning in a way that varies the way we engage and allow students to process and express, and also the way that we represent material. So embracing learner variability through the UDL guidelines is a surefire way to make it work. So with the idea of learner variability, we say expert learners, right? That's our goal. We want all students to be expert learners. Now, in UDL language, we know that means every single learner. That means the students we typically consider expert, right? People who don't embrace UDL yet say, okay, expert learners. And I've had many conversations with parents who say, expert, my child has disabilities. He'll never be an expert at anything. And so I take a nice deep breath and I patiently respond in the ways that, yes, but your child can be his or her personal best. And that is what UDL means by expert learners. That includes each learner in the room, the learners who are falling into that typical lens of success. And then we have the students who also are struggling, who are expert learners as well. Every student has the ability to express a strength and to express his or her understanding of whatever it is that we're teaching. So we have to find a way to make that work. So expert learners, we talked about students, right? It means those shining stars, those ones who fall into that typical what does a successful student look like? And it also means the struggling students who are also successful. We have to keep that in mind, that it means being personal best. So let's connect that to co-teachers, right? We have the co-teaching situations where, again, we're one of the two co-teachers, or both if it's a really sad situation, who's just say, help, let me just get through the year. We have to apply that expert learner to it and say, okay, each co-teacher has some area of expertise. Let's illuminate those areas and work together so that maybe we can be like Ginger and Fred, right? And really work well together and just so smoothly in sync. And the reality is there are many odd couples out there. We have two diverse, philosophies, personalities, but yet it can still work as long as we embrace that each learner in the room, students and teachers, have strengths, have areas of expertise to share, and in actionable ways, right? So our second mantra of everything's in context. So again, learning preferences, not learning styles. We are not going to embrace learning styles as this box to fit students into. We are going to embrace the idea that every learner, including ourselves, we have preferences, yes, for sure. I love moving around and I love visual, but there are times that I need additional auditory, right? And that serves, I believe, everyone who's at this webinar today, and just in any classroom, we have preferences, and teachers need to remember that we need to meet the needs of the preferences, and we can use the UDL guidelines to help us meet the needs of those preferences. I'm going to shift now. It doesn't really matter which direction we go because this is a beautiful cycle. Following through with our strengths-based focus, we're going to pull from the work of neurodiversity and the fact that, again, every brain is different, and we embrace the strengths that each student has. And so pulling from the work of Thomas Armstrong, great book on neurodiversity in the classroom, I highly recommend to you, has been a very, it's on my desk every day. It's a resource. I share it out all the time. It's very perfectly in sync with UDL in terms of embracing variability and guiding students to be his or her personal best, focusing on the strengths, not focusing on the deficit model. That does not help us to really achieve student expertise in any area, leading towards our discussion on differentiated instruction in UDL. So there's this great divide. Oh, I'm already differentiating. Now you're telling me I shouldn't. And it's like, it's something that is not a light switch. This is something that is, again, a process. UDL is all about process. So don't try to define what differentiated is and compare it to UDL. Just embrace the two. And one day that light will go off. It took a little while for me, I would say, because I was so immersed in an environment that was not very UDL friendly. And I was thrust into this very departmentalized way of looking at reaching students. I was struggling with knowing that it wasn't right. It didn't feel right to me, but trying to make it fit. And that's, again, where UDL came. So when we think of those co-teaching models or embracing each co-teacher's strengths, we say, okay, so we're going to embrace the variability. We're going to have these structures of teaching and delineate roles so that each co-teacher is active. And so when we look at differentiating the instruction, if we differentiate alone without UDL, we're going to say, okay, so Johnny and Sally have decoding issues and reading comprehension struggles. So let's give them this graphic organizer, or let's pull them aside and give them additional work on decoding. So our focus when we're just differentiating is on fixing the students' deficits, right? So with all good intentions, that could work for the moments, but yet we're not really meeting the needs of creating this learner as this ongoing journey. If we differentiate through the UDL, we say, oh, okay, so we have 2 students with decoding and comprehension difficulties. Let's change our environment. Let's alter the curriculum a little bit. Let's adapt. Let's design. That's the word I was looking for. Let's design our curriculum where we're going to naturally embed differentiation so that students who have difficulty with decoding or comprehension have options within the moments, all inclusively in the instructional time, so that they're not separate, they're not segregated, and their deficits aren't illuminated, but their strengths are. So when we add that to the co-teaching planning, I like to think about planning. I know a lot of teachers I work with and teachers that I work with across the states and so on need to have the steps of lesson planning. Okay, here's what we do. We do this first, second, third. My mind doesn't work that way. My mind works with, yes, there are steps, but within those steps, there's this cycle. So bear with me for a minute here. We have cycle where, again, flexibility is key. There's ongoing communication constantly. And within this ongoing communication is where we remain flexible, and we're going to meet to co-plan to the realistic, manageable measures that we have. Finding the time is always an issue unless you happen to strike it lucky and work in a district that provides co-planning time with you. I've had experiences where I naturally, just because our preps were aligned together, where we had prep time together, but the co-teacher may or may not have wanted to use that time the same way I was hoping. So I may have been in a situation where a co-teacher would say, here's my plan book, go Xerox it. And that was our co-planning time. I would go Xerox the plans and come back hoping to talk about how we're going to plan the process. And that didn't always happen to the degree that I wanted it to. But again, I'd never stopped. You have to stay resilient. So ongoing communication in the instructional process, including formative assessment constantly. So it's not about the grades. It's not about this end product. It's how much can we learn from our students just by observing how they're listening to us, how they are taking notes, how they are working in peers. We can use exit tickets, so many different formative assessment techniques that we can use as a way to say, is our instruction meeting the needs of these students? What else can we do so that we can really illuminate the students' strengths? And constantly reflecting, which goes back to the communication. So this is the ideal vision of what co-planning looks like in UDL fashion. And it's a natural process. I would say it happens more often than it doesn't. It's just a matter of being mindful of realizing that these steps, these wonderful phases of a wonderful cycle really do make planning time easier. Even if you don't have planning time, there's always a way to figure it out. So it's combining the 2 teachers' expertise, right? Embracing variability, that context of learning so that we can co-create active learning for everyone. And then again, assessing them and monitoring in the moments of instruction, which is that formative assessment, right? This slide is kind of nice. It makes everything look so easy, right? Just combining teachers' expertise, right? That's simple. Getting back to the shared vision and their areas of expertise, co-creating active learning, make sure we're giving students time for and space to share their voice and have choice and really have meaningful connections to what we're teaching. And then with 2 teachers in the room, how easy is it to assess and monitor in the moments, right? Each teacher can really zoom in and hone in on what students need. And co-teachers should be also checking in with one another and monitoring themselves in the moments. So I say, how easy is it with, see my smile? Like, it's easy, yet it's not. But it really can be if we stay focused on those days where it's not so easy, where we feel like we're struggling a little bit. If we just kind of zoom into these 3 phases right here, it makes it doable. It makes it very manageable. Just quickly comparing co-planning through a UDL lens, when we think about curriculum, the old view. Okay, here's a textbook, here's a teacher up at the front, here's very teacher directed. Okay, here's where I'm teaching you, and every one of you will come with me along this wonderful process of learning, and bam, we'll all be successful. Yeah, so that happens sometimes, right? But most of the time we know that success is this beautiful, messy process where resiliency and struggles and challenges occur. And this is what learning and success really looks like. And so we evolve as learners along the way. And so within this messy cycle also is multiple means of representing and engaging and helping students process and actively be strategic learners, rather than us giving them this one way of learning through a textbook or through a PowerPoint or through just the teacher lecture. No, we provide options for this beautiful messy cycle. Using the UDL guidelines, this is for your reference. You know, it's just really focusing on why is it we're learning what we're learning? How can we make it happen? What is it that you need as an individual? Which is why I love working with older students, because they become real strong advocates for the strategies that work for them. And then our mindfulness of keeping in mind what we're teaching and providing those options for students. So when we think about creating this all-inclusive co-teaching learning community, right? That was the third mantra. We remember that students are part of the co-teaching team, right? I don't know how many teachers forget that. Students are part of the co-teaching team. I've actually had students who say, students, why do you care what they're thinking? They don't have an opinion. I know, I'm cringing too. I can't even believe I just repeated it, but it's true. It's been told to me, you know, going back years and years and years. I don't even remember who the co-teacher was. Thankfully, I blocked that out. But we have to remember students are part of the team. They do have a voice. Their opinions do matter. And many times when we feel like we're not reaching a student, if there are strategies that aren't working, ask the student what's working for him or her. And also maybe the student would have ideas for what could work. Involving parents, inviting administrators into the classroom. There's a great hashtag on Twitter, hashtag #ObserveMe, and I know that there are some schools in my district and also schools that I'm connected with across the states who are using this, and we have these instructional rounds where teachers just invite administrators and colleagues to come into the classroom. And how great would that be if inclusive settings were just like that? Just please come into the room, administrators, in a non-evaluative way, but in a way that provides feedback and feed forward so that we can really all grow and work together as learners to really help each student to meet his or her personal best, right? That expert learning. So I do feel like I spoke quickly, and I know I did, but it's recorded, so you can always listen to it again and slow it down. I just wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for the conversational piece. So at this point, I want you just to think about what your intention was at the beginning of our time today, what your goal was. And if you don't remember, or if it evolved in so many ways that you're not sure how to put it into words, I gave you this little sentence stem you can say. I used to think co-teaching and UDL were, and now I think that might help you. And I just wanted to, now that we're up to the Q&A part of the conversation, which I'm really excited about, remember the chat box, which I haven't looked at once yet, confession, but I will. I'm also glad it's recorded because I will go back and look at all the quotes and questions. But please tag us on Twitter. All those hashtags, this one is brand new, ECTUDL. I just created that today because I know the code for, if you wanted to buy the book, you have a code for a discount, which is ECT, right? Elevating Co-Teaching, right? Like we need another acronym in special ed for 12 for today's date. And you can always visit me at my blog and leave a comment. And please don't hesitate to email me. I do love getting email from people all over. So let's continue with conversations, action steps, and thinking about what your next step is. And I thank you so much for your time today. So David.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I have a couple of questions maybe to start things off. I was laughing when I saw Adam Delaney's comment there in the chat box, choice voice baby, he says, because I had noted a couple of things about the book that I think are so powerful. One is your tremendous emphasis on choice. And there are some great, in chapter 7 of the book, you have some great tips and suggestions for how to bring choice into the classroom in some general and specific ways. So you talk about even allowing kids to choose the seats they sit in, to have a choice of assessments, different ways of showing what they know, having choice boards, having flex time. Could you talk a little more about the importance of choice and how that supports not only the work that learners do, but how actually providing choice really can improve instructional practice as well?
Yeah, that's a great, thanks for illuminating that. I come to a quote that a student shared with me about 2 years ago. He said to me, wow, you really care about what we think. And my quick response was, oh, so do all the teachers on the team. We all work together. And he goes, but you really get us. And it all comes down to that choice. I, at that time, was the only teacher who really did advocate for choice. And I taught in all of the content area classes with them, but I also had them to myself during a strategies, a study skills class, and they got to choose their seats. They chose when we did review for the next, the chemistry test coming up, they got to really, have a lot of choice in that. And boy, did they really buy into not only the content, but into learning from one another. So getting teachers to create the space for that in the classroom, I think the biggest pushback I receive is time as a manageable piece to it. It's true, classes are like 41 minutes, and teachers have this wonderful, great content and way of presenting it and their own stories to share. But I think when we naturally embed choice, okay, if you're new at this, don't do it every day, right? Ask yourself, okay, what's a manageable, realistic way of starting to do this? You can do it once a week, once every 2 weeks. I wouldn't go any further than that. Once every 2 weeks is it. But once a week would be ideal. And then before you know it, you're naturally embedding it more and more often because you see that the students start to care about their own voice. One other story was a student who, there was a co-teacher I was working with who was just getting on board with my style of teaching and the ability to raise and elevate student voice within the moments. And the student at first said, wait, I don't know what I think. I don't even know, they're not used to even hearing their voice. And then when you ask them to share or to make a choice about something, they freeze because they're not used to doing that. So being patient with it. And I think the real bottom line of making sure student choice is a part of the natural process is that we need to value that students need to be independent, self-regulated thinkers, and giving choice is really the best way to do that. I don't hear you, David.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was lip reading for a little bit.
About that, yeah. Well, just testing to see if your lip reading.
Yeah.
But giving voice also comes up in one of the great resources you include at the end of the book, which are sample letters that readers can take and adapt to share not only with parents to try to recruit their interest, but letters to the students themselves, inviting them to have a voice in how they learn. And then the letters to the parents were very striking to me as well, just a way of sort of explaining to parents what are we doing in a co-teaching classroom? What is universal design for learning? And your letter even sort of sketches out the 3 principles in very friendly language for parents. So talk a little about the importance of recruiting parents and learners themselves, but recruiting a family into buying into this teaching model.
Excellent. Yeah. So anyone who has co-taught knows the horrors of parents who are still within that departmentalized categorical way of viewing things. Oh no, my student is with those kids, and or my student's in that inclusive setting, so that means he or she needs help. And so we really need to bust through those myths and really involve parents in the conversations of that variability, that it truly exists everywhere. So the letter serves, like, to the students, it serves as a way to, again, it could be used as a mentor text where teachers can use that and say, okay, here's one way that we're expressing our view of UDL and what our classroom environment will be like. What language should we keep, or how should we write it for our own class? And then they can create that together. And for parents, it could be maybe the students and the teachers could write a letter to the parents together. How great would that be, right? Student voice within, the real unique community that are involved. And this way we can close those gaps between the myths, those belief systems that really segregate rather than make everyone inclusive. So one quick analogy I made to a parent that for some reason really worked wonders. One year I had a very difficult parent who wouldn't talk to me, would talk to the general ed teacher. It wasn't a student with special needs at all. It was a student in the inclusive setting. And because the co-teacher and I worked well together, I taught everyone, and this parent had a real hard time with that. Oh, Mrs. Stein is teaching, that means my student needs help, my child needs help. So I had a very friendly conversation, and I explained it to her because I knew she loved to shop. So I said, well, when you go to the mall, you're just with everyone. You're not like looking at people and putting them into categories. I said, learning is, the environment should be as natural as that. So that seemed to have worked for her. So these letters are a starting point to try to, again, bridge the gap between inclusive versus non-inclusive ways of thinking and acting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's great. Someone is asking what don't miss areas in the book you can point us to. And I would say for me, one of them is that chapter 6, which is entitled Empowering Students as UDL Partners. I think it's a terrific chapter and a really important one, and something that I think we're understanding more and more in the implementation of UDL, how important it is to get learners to be partners in their own education, their own learning. Elizabeth, there was a question also, how do you give choice to 2- and 3-year-olds? It's really hard for me, one person writes.
Yeah, so yeah, it definitely is, but when you consider the fact that these are still thinkers, right? These young students are still, they're just learning how to make choice. So I would suggest then you have your, UDL is all about the goal. So keep that goal strong, keep it firm. And then you maybe give 2 choices where either choice, it doesn't matter, goes to that same goal. And so giving the student a choice of, would you like to this or that? Or, give between 2 choices that lead to the same goal, rather than leaving it open-ended that you can do with older students. You can say, well, here's our goal. How would you like to achieve this? You can be more open-ended with older students. With younger students, you want to just narrow down the choice to maybe between 2, and maybe make it very visual as well, not just auditory. You want to say, like if it's, choosing between 2 colors, you're teaching them colors, and you can have, 2 colors in front of them, or however you want to do it, making it visual as possible is extremely helpful.
That's great. We had another question about when we're talking about changing the environment, how do you do that when administrators or teachers may feel hemmed in by Common Core or other kinds of other kinds of what they might see as restrictions on the curriculum?
Yeah, I lived that. We all live that. That's a great question. All these questions are great. But so again, it becomes always connecting to what you are already doing. So, and then going back to the UDL guidelines, what's really powerful is if you take a blank sheet of paper and you write, trifold it. So you have the 3 columns: engagement, action and expression, strategies and expression, so, and representation, and really reflecting on a lesson that you just did and comparing it to the UDL guidelines and seeing where you're naturally embedding UDL in already, even if you're feeling restricted within the environment. And that really helped me. That helped me sleep at night sometimes when I was working with some co-teachers that made it very difficult, or within just the mindset within the system of education that we live. And then really seeing how connected naturally we are to UDL, and then saying, okay, we can do more, we must do more because these kids need us to. So that's definitely one very quick reflective tool you can use. Another piece, I'll just refer you to a blog post I wrote. It's called, I don't remember the exact title, but if you look up naturally, I think it's called Naturally Embed UDL in No Time. So if you look that up on my 2 Teachers in the Room, that came from literally a lesson that a co-teacher and we worked together. We worked well together to a point, as long as I, stayed within my box and did, and stayed within traditional ways of teaching, which was hard for me. So I decided, I saw this one lesson that I ended up walking into because, as co-teachers, we know things change all the time. We have to be flexible. So the lesson wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And so I had to be really flexible in the moments. And so that was not a problem. But after the lesson, I decided to write it up within UDL language. And I wrote it up, and I loved it so much. I ended up entering it as, submitting it as my blog post, but I shared it with my co-teacher. And I said, look what we did. Look how we took this very difficult situation in terms of the content that we were sharing, and the time restraints, and it was very Common Core, and it was very complex, but we, within the moments, were flexible within our own areas of expertise, and we've created this lesson that really was extremely UDL friendly. And to this day, she's still evolving along the UDL journey, and it's beautiful to see. And that was the turning point for her, a general ed teacher who wanted to kick me out of the room every day. So it really, that's something I would look into if you'd like to look more.
That's fabulous. Any other questions out there for Elizabeth? I'm not sure I've gotten them all. Okay, great. Well, Elizabeth, one of the other terrific things that you have in the appendix to the book, there are the sample letters. There are terrific planning documents for co-teachers to really get on the same page with their vision. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the idea of crafting a shared vision between 2 teachers who likely are coming into the classroom having had different experiences. One is a special ed teacher, one a general ed teacher. They've come with different educational backgrounds themselves, different courses probably in their pre-service education or even in their in-service. So can you talk about how a couple of ways to establish that shared vision?
Absolutely. So I think it should really be organic. It shouldn't be this scripted, like there's so many checklists out there that, oh, co-teachers should, share their pet peeves. They should this, they should that. But I feel like it should be a real organic way of connecting. So it's going to be different for each pair. When I think back to my own co-teaching experiences, it was extremely different depending on who I was working with. And some of them evolved throughout the year. By the end of the year, then, now we see our shared vision. Sometimes it doesn't always just emerge like that, so quickly. So I think, jotting down our personal strengths, discussing them, jotting down what our philosophies of learning is. Like, classroom management has to be discussed. We have to consider those elements that make any teacher effective, and then let each co-teacher have a have the space, have the time to share his or her thoughts, and then applying that yes and language to it rather than, you know, being met with resistance is really hard. So many times when I was in that shared vision mode or attempting to be in that shared vision mode, and I would say something like, oh, well, I really think I really like making time for students to process the information. So like having a 3-minute pause or having a quick slide and talk to each other so they can process what they're thinking. And so many times I would get, no, but we don't have time for that. And so rather than my getting upset, I would embrace that and say, okay, I understand that it doesn't feel like we have time for it, but how about we try it at least once? And then I would say, no, scratch that. Let's try it 3 times. And I don't want to know what you think of it until that 3rd time. And so I'll listen to you the 1st, the 2nd time, but we're going to try it 3 times before we ixnay it or before we embrace it. So, and typically what would happen is after that 3rd time, one teacher's coming into mind, she said to me, you know, you still make me twitch when you come in the room, she said, but I'm really starting to like this. So, you know, you just have to be, again, resilient and share your voice, have those difficult conversations. Don't hold back because you're afraid of what the other person's going to think. This is for the kids. We need to advocate for what's best for students, knowing that each teacher has a vision for what's best for students and just finding a way to bring it together.
That's terrific. Now, a really tough question. This is for 20 bonus points.
Good, we love tough questions.
Yeah, 20 bonus points for this one. Do you recommend that teachers think about particular student needs and embedding solutions as a first step in using UDL, or to look at the checkpoints and try to embed those in a non-student specific way? So you're looking at thinking of your particular individuals and then applying the principles, or applying the principles in a more general way?
Yeah, that's really a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it shows too, like, so for me, I have to like go back a little bit because when I was first immersed with UDL, you know, it does feel like this linear piece, like, okay, this is what we do first, then next, then next. So once UDL becomes this more natural way to embed what you're already doing, there aren't these steps. So for me right now, I'm going to go back a little bit. I would say there's the process of that class learning profile sheet. So we know our students, right? At the beginning of the year, we always go through these interviews and surveys, and we go through all of these different wonderfully valuable strategies to getting to know our students. And then all too often, those surveys, those interviews, the information, okay, it gets filed away or it gets returned back to the students, and teachers move on. But we need to really keep those that information that we receive from students in the mix so that it becomes part of the process. Connecting that with the UDL process, I would say that when you're planning, you're going to be planning for all right, again, staying true to the goal. What is the goal? And then you say, okay, how can I shape the environment so that I'm embedding the 3 UDL principles, right? So that unintended barriers are already knocked down. And then you look at what the students' needs are. What additional needs. So in a co-taught classroom, that's when specially designed instruction would come in. So UDL paves the way so that we can then reach the needs of students through specially designed instruction. Without UDL, what happens is many teachers never get to the specially designed instruction because all those barriers unintentionally are in the way. Does that make sense? Microphone.
Microphone. Thank you. We have time, we have 2 minutes. So one quick question, and that is, how does the environment need to change to support UDL, co-teaching, and flexible learning environments? That is that the environment is often the place where teachers start with UDL. So what are some ways of improving that classroom environment right away?
Yeah, good question. So think about yourself as a learner. This goes to all teachers, whoever asked it. Thank you. It's a great final question, if it is our final question. Think about how you like to learn, right? We love to be relaxed. We don't want stress. We don't want rigidity where we're forced to come up with this one right answer, right? We all want to feel that fluidity, that natural way of connecting with what we think about whatever it is we're learning. And so to me, that's the first and main step that all teachers need to really not only embrace, but continually reflect on, to make sure that the environment is, we hear risk-free learning environment, but what does that really mean? It means really that each student is comfortable to be whoever he or she is, that each student is connected to the strengths that he or she has. If they're struggling in a certain area, that's okay. They're working towards it. Maybe they're not masterful at this yet, but they're working towards it. And so if they don't feel like they're good in math, but they're working towards it. And so, but they do find something they are good in, and they elevate their voice. There's a student that I'm coming up in my mind who really struggled in all academic areas, and it was really difficult to find something that we could create within the environment to make him feel part of the process. And then I realized, wow, I saw him, I had lunch duty, right? So we're as teachers, we're always learning. And I see him in the lunchroom with his friends, and he's taking this leadership role in whatever conversation they were having. And I'm like, that's it. So we brought that back into the classroom and said, okay, so we're going to start giving leadership roles to our students. And we didn't just stigmatize him and say, okay, Johnny, you're going to have this leadership role, but within our environment, we're going to rotate certain areas where students are going to take turns being leaders, as in whatever areas. And there's always ways to do that. So that provided a strength that he connected with, and he came to class less anxious. He came to class much more ready to learn and struggle beautifully through whatever it is we were teaching.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Elizabeth Stein, thank you so much for your time today and for this great webinar. Here's the book, Elevating Co-Teaching with UDL. A couple of notes. If any of you are coming to the Council for Exceptional Children conference in Boston next week, CAST will have a booth there. You can buy the book there with a special discount. You can also, a week from tomorrow, a week from Thursday, you can meet Elizabeth Stein at our booth around midday, I believe. And but come to the booth and look for more information on that. CAST co-founder David Rose is receiving the CEC Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to special education next week. So we're delighted about that, and we'll be celebrating that as well. I want to be sure to thank Mindy Johnson, Nathan Treitz, and Allie Berg for helping get this webinar produced. And Mindy sort of does a masterful job here managing the back channel. And Nathan Treitz did a great job in getting us up and running. He's got multiple monitors over there. He looks like he's playing keyboards for Electric Light Orchestra over there. So he's doing a great job. And I wanted to just close with a note that in addition to picking up our book, if you have a book idea yourself, if you'd like to be in the author's spot, say a year from now, send me your idea. Or go on our website and get our proposal guidelines. We'd love to hear from you. We want to know what your book ideas are, and let us know what you're thinking. So the channel is always open. We are at publishing@cast.org. Email me here, David Gordon, and I'd love to hear from you. Okay, that's a wrap, and we'll got you out of here 2 minutes early today. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.